What's up guys, Dylan here from AYCB, and today I am super excited to be bringing you a preview of Gorinto, which is a game that just had a really successful Kickstarter campaign. It's not out yet, but it will be delivered to backers in February of 2021, so you have a bit of wait ahead if you backed it. But today we're going to be looking at an early build of the game and adding a bit of fuel to your anticipation fire, so to speak. And if you haven't backed it, if you're not familiar with Gorinto, this is your chance to learn all about it and decide if it's for you. One thing I do want to note, this is the prototype copy of the game, so the components, even the rules, they might not be final design, but we're going to look at the prototype today and just tell you a little bit more about it. So let's dive right in. So Gorinto is an abstract tile placement game, and turns are very straightforward in Gorinto. So all you're going to be doing is there's going to be what is called the path, and it's the outer area of the board here that surrounds the main cluster of tiles in the middle. You're going to be taking one of those tiles of your choice and moving them into the mountain, only along the row or column that it's adjacent to. You're then going to be gathering new elements onto your personal player board, depending on which element you brought there and depending on your understanding of that element. So every one of the 5 elements in the game will gather tiles differently, and depending on how many you've already collected, you'll gather a larger amount from the main mountain board. So let's look at each of the 5 elements and tell you a little bit more about them. For instance, when a fire element is moved into the mountain, it can collect new elements in a column from wherever it was placed. So if I place it here, I can choose any of these 4 tiles. The water element is similar, but can collect elements in a row from where it was placed. The void element collects diagonally from each corner of the tile that was placed onto the board. So for instance, if I place the void tile here, I could collect any one of these 4 tiles. Similarly, wind collects orthogonally from wherever it was placed on each of its 4 sides. And finally, earth is unique in that it collects from beneath wherever it was placed, and you can select any tiles from underneath. It doesn't have to be the one that's on top. So I mentioned understanding of elements before. This basically determines how many you can collect from the mountain when you move a particular element into the mountain. So at the start of the game, everyone has 0 tiles on their player board. Your understanding is how many you have plus 1. So everyone's understanding starts at 1, hence you can gather 1 tile from any element. But let's say I have gathered 3 fire tiles. That means that my understanding is 3 plus 1, which is now 4, which means that when I move the fire tile into the mountain, I can collect the max of 4. The most you can ever collect is 4, so once you exceed 3 on your board, you're always going to be collecting 4. Just keep in mind you have to take that many. You can't decide to take less unless it's impossible to take a tile. So you have to take the maximum, which can throw off your numbers depending on what you're trying to score on. So play essentially continues this way with a player moving an element into the mountain until there are an amount of elements on the path section of the board that is less than the number of players. At that point, the season will end. There's 4 seasons of the game, spring through winter. We will change to the next season, and we will score the bonus goal cards that are in the game. This is what fundamentally changes each game. Whatever the goal cards are, that's what's going to determine how you're trying to organize your stacks of elements. You're going to score those. They stay the same through all 4 seasons, and then you're going to repopulate the path and do it again. And at the end of winter, you'll score that final time, but you'll also score the end of game goal cards. There's 2 of these put out at the start of the game, and they just have to do with having the most of 2 different kinds of elements. So what did I think of Gorinto in my time with the prototype copy? Well, I really enjoyed it. I played a lot of abstract games and a lot of tile placement games especially, but this one, it just found a way to really set itself apart from the others. It didn't feel like something I had played before, but I really enjoyed it. And I think the thing that kept me coming back to Gorinto the most are the goal cards. So I've played games with public objectives before. That's nothing new. There's a lot of games I have that have those and kind of keep the game fresh by giving you a new objective each game. That's what Gorinto does, but these ones are just so drastic. They really change the way you're going after tiles. You can have one that is, specifically at the end of each season, you're going to score each element separately, and whoever around the table has the least number is going to score 3 points for it. That fundamentally changes the game, because rather than trying to gather a whole bunch of elements, especially because you're trying to for the end of game scoring conditions already, you're now having to minimize the amount of elements you're grabbing to be able to score those points. So just one more example on a scoring card I found that was really interesting is there was one that every single one of your stacks of elements, you only score for the ones that are different from all your other stacks. So you can't just balance out your stacks and have 5 across the board for each one, because you will not score any of them. So trying to gather elements, especially in the later game when you have to be taking 4 every single time, and trying to keep them all at different levels is just it's excruciating to try to plan, if I place this element here, it's going to gather me these 3 that I want, but it's also going to gather me 1 earth, and that's going to throw off my balance in a way that I don't want. So there's this great theme here of, keeping your elements in balance in the exact way that you want to score max points, and every goal card does that a little bit differently. So it just makes every game a little bit different in the way that you approach it, and you have to really use a whole different level of thinking compared to the last game you played, which is something that I just think will make a lot of people come back to Gorinto and not feel like they're playing the same game twice. And there are a decent number of goal cards in this game. There's a hefty stack, so you're going to not only see different goal cards each game, you're going to get different combinations as well, because 2 get drawn out each game, so the combinations can change things up. So there's a lot of variety here. It shouldn't really feel dull or that you're playing the same game twice anytime soon. Gorinto also plays very quickly. This is a very fast game to play. The early seasons can be done way quicker than you're expecting. Obviously, the later seasons take a little bit longer. And all the games felt very close. There was never a game where someone really just took off with it. Generally, you're rewarded for making really good plays. A misplay will cost you the couple points you need to win, and a really good play or a series of really good plays will keep you in the lead. So you feel like every decision matters, and you're really trying to just pinpoint what is the best play every time. It leads to a little bit of analysis paralysis. People can spend a lot of times trying to decide with all the tiles out there, which one should I move to the mountain to get the most points. But in general, it didn't feel like it dragged too much, and it just made for a very rewarding experience when you made the play that really just balanced your elements the exact way that you wanted. All of this kind of ties into one other thing worth mentioning about Gorinto, is that there is a lot to think about. The amount of times that turns have been spent in this game with someone's head, down to the table, trying to count their stacks because you want to see the exact number that are in there. Pretty much every turn just to decide what you should take. There's so much to think about with both goal cards. You have to decide which one you're going for if you're trying to balance going for both, or when you're going to make the switch of going from one to the other. And I also found that player interaction tended to be pretty minimal. Because there's so much to think about, I never found it possible for me to really look at other people's boards and see what they're gathering to say, okay, I'm going to block them from getting this void because then that's going to get them more points. I was already thinking about so much of my own board. I didn't have time to, especially when you have like 3 or 4 players in the game, I didn't have time to look at other people's boards. It's not impossible, but just note that it's going to be a little bit difficult. You're probably just going to be resigned to your own board and what you're doing. All things considered, Gorinto is a super fun and exciting game. The variety that comes with every single session, depending on the gold cards that are out there, it almost felt like a puzzle each time. How am I going to piece all of these elements together to maximize my score based on the 2 gold cards that came out? I've had the same gold card come out in separate games, but paired with a different gold card each time, it felt completely different. So lots of variety there. Something I really value in games because it just gives you extra incentive for them to keep hitting the table. Overall, the varied gameplay, the quick play time, and the fact that it's coupled with the fact that it's great at all player counts, just make this a game that is, I think, really, really good. And if this excites you, it's one that I think you'll definitely want to look into more. If you're interested in Gorinto and want to learn more about it or want to find out how to pre-order, you can click the link in our description. You can go to allyoucanboard.com for a whole ton more board gaming content, or you can hit us up on any of our social media channels. Reach out to us, send us a message, ask us any questions, we'll always answer. Hit us up on YouTube, subscribe to us if you really like these videos. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for checking out our preview of Gorinto, and we will see you in the next one.